Welcome to this episode of The Marriage Creative. We are a happy family with one really big story, and we want to help you grow, strengthen, and rekindle your marriage.
Welcome into The Marriage Creative. I'm Caleb Nelson.
And Carla.
And we're here to continue our conversations about all things marriage, family, and whatever else we can dig up.
Everything else.
Yeah. I was thinking earlier about community and how the word's made up of common unity, and how a lot of times, especially in church circles, community can sometimes get in the way of our family unity. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes you don't have community, and what you have to work in is your family unity. And now you have to find a balance. I mean, it's like everything. It's all balance. And I was just thinking about that, how important it is, not necessarily the church, the four walls, all of that, because Jesus didn't have that. I mean, he would go to synagogue and argue with the Pharisees.
The scribes.
Yeah. He would argue with them at church, if you will. But he spent most of his time in a common unity with his friends and even his foes at times around the table, in what the 21st century has deemed as small groups. Mm-hmm. And, years ago, God literally spoke to me and told me a lot of secrets, if you will, which aren't secrets, but the church body proper kind of doesn't necessarily want to focus on, talk about. In some aspects, a lot of churches embrace it. A lot of churches, other churches don't. But the small group model. And we've been small group leaders for years and had great success with those. And it's been really cool to watch people grow away from the four walls and at the table.
Right.
Yeah. So that's kind of a thing that we have in common, is a heart for that. And we've seen some really great success, if you will. I mean, do we call it success? I mean, how do you quantify it as success, or?
I don't know.
I mean, that was been a great look for a video, that questioning face there.
Well, I mean, I don't know what the word is, success or
growth, change. I mean, if that's the common goal, is to help people grow in their relationship, well,
yeah,
then I guess you could quantify that as success.
Or, knowledge.
Yeah. So, I don't know why that came to me today, that would be a good topic for us. Because we go to church in Ohio and we live in South Carolina, and we have some common unity with our fellow church members.
Right.
A lot of it is online. We're just finishing up an online, a Zoom small group. And considering maybe doing that ourselves. I don't know, some listeners may be interested in that with us. And at the same time, we go, not as often as probably we would like, to be able to be in the building with them.
Right.
And it's a different experience when you're there. Now, that's a really different model than that looks a lot different than what most people live. I mean, they might have...
Or what we lived previously.
Right. I mean, they may have like their favorite TV preacher or somebody they listen to through the week who taught a great sermon, or, they always go back and listen to this guy in Florida or that guy in Texas or whatever. But to actively participate in a distance church is different. COVID's changed some of that. But it's really, it's a different model. It's a different way of life. And even then, we, from time to time, pretty regularly actually attend a local body to participate there, primarily in just the coming together inside the four walls. Mm-hmm. So we kind of do it both ways, which that probably, warps up some people too to think about. But the commonality is that we find common unity or community with people inside the church and outside the church. And we have our best results, if you will, around our table. Mm-hmm. And that's been a big deal of a big part of our lives for the last, 5 to 6, 7 years. I mean, before you were sick, we began that. And as soon as you got well enough, we started it right back. So, in your experience, what are some of the positives of having that in-home community?
The discussion, for sure. Sorry. The discussion aspect, because, if you're sitting in a service and a preacher is preaching from the pulpit, you might have a question, but you're not going to raise your hand and ask it.
Right.
So I think the intimacy of being able to discuss, how does this speak to you, and how does this speak to me, and how do I interpret this? How do you interpret this?
Right.
Or, oh, I know, this verse really speaks to me because one time such and such happened, and God really highlighted this verse for me at that time. And so the feedback of, back to the word, iron sharpens iron.
Right.
And so it's not just being talked to, it's, that intimacy of the communication factor that I think is the most effective. You learn from each other's experiences.
Right. I think a lot of people kind of have some apprehension when it comes to small groups, at least leading one possibly, or taking charge, if you will, and initiating doing that. They'll rely on the deacons in the church or the lay leaders or the pastor associate or somebody to do that because they think maybe they're not qualified, because they're not a lay leader, or they're not a pastor associate or someone with a theological degree.
No, I don't think that has anything to do with it.
You don't think that slows people down?
No.
Okay. Why would people slow down on that idea?
Because they have to invite people into their home.
Okay.
It's a privacy factor, I think.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Talk to me about that, because see, we don't have that at our house, so I don't consider that at all.
Well, I think for most people, one, having the connections, close enough connections with people they would feel comfortable inviting into their home, especially nowadays with so many differing opinions politically, socially. Just, it's very hard to, I think, find a close-knit group of people that you feel like-minded with. And if you do, it still doesn't mean that you want to necessarily, I don't know, open up your home. And
why do you have to be like-minded outside of Jesus?
You don't have to be. Okay. I'm saying, but I think the fear of that too is a factor, because your home is like your sanctuary. You open that up, it makes you vulnerable to those areas. So I think that's...
But when you read in the Bible, the people that opened their homes to Jesus were blessed immensely. And really that's kind of what this whole thing is doing. It's opening your house to Jesus.
Yeah, but it's also a lot of work.
Well, I didn't say it wasn't a lot of work. I mean, we've carried that for a long time.
But I'm saying if you have to have your house ready for company, you more than likely are going to have, I don't know, you're going to serve something. Maybe it's not a meal, but maybe it's just coffee, or I don't know. But, the whole aspect of that, I think, I'm just speaking from a woman's standpoint.
Okay, that's what we're looking for
Maybe not for the man's standpoint, but it's a whole nother level of opening up your sacred space to other people. I think that's a drawback for some people.
Okay, so we've done this for years. Is it worth it?
I think it is. I mean,
people are now they're curious. Do you think that what we did in that fashion for those years was worth it?
Yeah.
So that's an encouragement. Maybe it was uncomfortable. Maybe it costs you time. Maybe it costs you money. Maybe it costs you somebody seeing that your house isn't perfect, or your bathroom floor has a hump in it because the tub leaks or hasn't been painted since you moved in, kind of a stuff. But was it worth it? Was the change that you saw in other people in their relationship to Jesus worth dealing with that?
Yeah, it also encourages, I think, you grow from it. I mean, I've grown from it, having conversation with people.
Right. Different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
I got you. So,
challenges you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. So that's one model. Okay. You bring people into the house. They actually sit in your living room, if you will. You call it the living room. I call it the den. We're bears, so we have a den in our house.
No.
Yeah. The other model, the new model, is a Zoom call, small group. We've just finished up a 12-weeker with our friends from all over the nation.
Mm-hmm.
And what are your thoughts on that one compared to in the house? Because this is an option that people can do and not have to have people in their house. So that takes off that, weight of that. So with that being removed, what is your opinion on the online small grouping?
I would say it's the same thing as going to church online.
Okay.
It's the benefit that it's convenient for us to attend church online. It's not convenient for us to drive 9 hours to be in the sanctuary.
Right.
But it's also very different to be watching online than to actually be in the same room, in the same atmosphere, and
Right.
So, I mean, it's the exact same pros and cons, I would say.
Okay. So, small group versus church. So we're talking small group here. Some of the pros are you can communicate with people from all over. I mean, some of our friends have small groups with 6 or 7 different nations represented in just their small group online,
Right.
like Brad and Charity.
Right.
At the same time, you can have a small group with people in your hometown. A lot of that happened during COVID when the lockdown was going on.
Right.
So there's some pros that you can still communicate. You can still build friendships. You can still build relationships. You're not knee to knee like you would be, let's say, that in insurance business. You're not knee to knee, around the dining room table. But you are still having that outside of the 4 walls experience. The cons to that would be you're not knee to knee and you're not in each other's house and you're not, feeling the same vibe or what. The energy is just a little different.
Right.
I did notice as our 12 weeks progressed, our energy seemed to change with the group as we began to know each other better.
Yeah. You kind of get more familiar, more comfortable.
Right.
Yeah.
So, if someone was considering doing an online group, I mean, would you encourage them to do that? I mean, if they didn't want to have people in their house, or maybe they didn't have a house that would be suitable for a group, would you encourage them to give that a shot or just kind of leave it alone? I mean, did you grow from that?
Yeah, I would definitely say it's a viable option.
Right. May not be the most ideal.
Well,
or could it be the most ideal?
Well, it just depends. I mean, one of the benefits is you do get to connect with people that aren't in your hometown. So there's definitely different perspectives that are, gained from that.
Right.
At the same time, when you are in the same town, you do know the same,
landmarks,
whatever.
You can understand my redneck slang or whatever.
Yeah, there's the familiarity of, knowing references that only you would know if you lived in the same town.
Right.
So I think there's benefits both ways. I think, a mixture of the two is good.
Yeah, yeah. So then that leads to the hybrid group, the hybrid model, which some people may or may not be aware of, and that would be you do have people in your dining room or your den, living room, and you also have people who participate online.
Right.
And you can jack in your laptop to your television, and they're on the big screen, and the camera's over here, and everybody's having a good time. So, I mean, I think that's a viable model as well. That if you do have the option to bring people or the desire to bring folks into your house. And maybe you only have 2 or 3 people. You might live way out in the middle of Idaho somewhere, and there's not a whole lot of people who are interested in what you're learning about. You get 2 or 3 neighbors over, and then you could, add an online aspect to that too. And Zoom's free for up to 40 minutes. So that makes it easy or easier. So I was just kind of curious, because we've done it both ways now. We haven't done the hybrid, but I guess, when you got 5 kids in the house, we kind of have a hybrid anyway.
Yeah.
So
one of the things, going back to the whole reason of community, as I think about scripturally, the Bible talks about bearing one another's burdens, and that 2 are better than 1, and 1 can put 1,000 to flight, but 2 can put 10,000 to flight. I think about the whole aspect of community in the sense that, for us, for instance, when I was not well, people checking on you, not just checking on me, but checking on you and checking on the kids. And people brought meals. People sent cards. People helped financially. People, helped do things for the kids while we were at doctor's appointments or just to get the kids out or whatever. And I just think about, so the community factor to me is a lot bigger than just a small group thinking of a small group.
Right. It is a lot bigger. I was just kind of honing it down to that, but you're exactly right. We had people from all over the country checking in on us, and we had people locally taking our kids to play putt-putt or video games or whatever, and it was just a great, it was a great, terrible experience, but it helped a lot.
Yeah. Well, having a sense of community locally. So that's where I can say the benefit too of you couldn't do that via Zoom.
Right.
Well, people can still check on you and do things, but a local body community is still so important.
Right. Like Barnabas from London couldn't come over and take the kids to play video games at the Big E or anything. It takes somebody in the town, basically.
That you're in.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. I can see the benefit to both, but when you actually, I guess, really dial it down to community, a local community, a local body, whether it be a church or a small group or whatever, is still, I think, super important.
Right. So if someone is a member of a church and they're going in on Sundays and they're just kind of participating in the worship service, most churches don't, half and half probably don't do Sunday school like we used to call it in the Deep South. They have just a worship service, and then they rely on small groups to kind of do the discipleship thing. If they're not participating in that discipleship process, I think that's one of the biggest things that's hurting the body right now is the lack of discipleship. So you probably have opportunities for people to get in and get involved, but a lot of people don't because they're too busy. They don't want to be asked to do it at their house. They're already running their kids around 14 different ball games a week. But even then, we've seen that it's really been worth it to have that. Right. I really do believe that.
Well, and a lot of people are super busy, their jobs, whatever, their families. Like you said, they might have extracurricular activities that they're involved in. But definitely, it's a selfish factor, I think, too. And I know even speaking for myself, there are times just out of selfishness, I just want downtime. And downtime is good. I'm not saying against that, anything against that, because it's necessary. I think it's crucial to even your own mental health to have downtime and space for that. But I can, definitely say there are times just in my own selfishness, I don't want to serve anybody else.
Right.
I don't want to get my house ready for anyone else. I don't want to prepare food for anyone,
Well, it takes a lot.
Yeah. So I think there's, it's definitely a I can compare it, I guess biblically I would compare it to the getting down and washing their feet. Like that, I think of that level of service.
Right.
When you're opening your home, you're, serving something, preparing something for someone. It's kind of that example. It's a humbling experience. It's a definitely a service mindset.
Mm-hmm.
You have to sort of set your own issues aside. Like what you want to do for the evening has to be put aside.
Right. That's got to wait.
Because
But not only it has to wait for you, it has to wait for the kids, the dog.
right, you're there to serve.
Right.
And I think that's why it's rewarding, because anytime you serve or give, I mean, it comes back to you.
Yeah. And that is the truth. I mean, I'll wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, it is very rewarding. It's challenging at times, if you will.
Right.
But I think it's worth it. I mean, any service that's even scriptural, it's, I enjoy doing it and hosting. And which is kind of funny because, back in the day, I might not have been that guy. But then I think about it. If you go all the way back to 1999, we're hosting small groups in our house. Way back in the day, we had
When we first got married.
960 square feet. And we had,
Yeah.
I don't even have how many people we had. We had more people than our house would hold.
Yeah.
And I remember I sat on the floor every week.
Yeah.
And other people did too because we were just full.
Back before we had kids.
Yeah. So, we've been doing this a while. I don't even think about that. 20 plus years on that.
Mm-hmm.
So, we were ahead of our time. But it was modeled really for you coming up
Mm-hmm.
with your parents hosting prayer meetings, in air quotes, here in their home.
Yeah.
Not where we live, but in their home.
Yeah, it was not unusual at all for me to go to bed with a house full of people. My parents would have friends and family members over. They would have a Bible study or a prayer meeting or whatever. And, I'd go to bed listening to them pray.
Right.
They'd be in the living room praying, and I'd, fall asleep in there or either go to my bedroom and, but
Right.
yeah, that was definitely I don't know, it wasn't a new experience for me at all.
Yeah, yeah. So I didn't experience that coming up. We'd have people over like at Christmas or, stuff like that, but never like a corporate body of believers coming over that I ever remember.
Right.
We'd have family
Or maybe a
reunions.
Sunday school party or something.
Yeah, but not like a prayer meeting where people are here and you're going to bed because people are still in there actually like reading the Bible or praying or something. That was...
Yeah.
that was when you told me that back in the day. I'm like, that's really weird. Now I do it all the time at my house. We've been up 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning at some of our small group meetings back in the day.
That was normal for me growing up. Yeah.
So I looked down at the watch and it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. We're still talking about the kingdom. So, yeah, I don't know. I wanted to have this discussion for some reason and just to encourage folks. I know that a lot of churches do it on, what do they call that? When you do it throughout semesters. So they have these semesters. They have a summer semester, and then they have a fall, and then a winter, and a spring semester of small groups.
Right.
A lot of churches have that model where they're getting people out of the building, getting them into their homes, or getting them into the fellowship halls or a Sunday school room or something. Mm. Sometimes on the property. Sometimes it's not even like biblical teaching. It's we have an axe throwing group, or we got a bowling group, or
like back in the day, all the churches had baseball teams.
softball,
Whatever.
Yeah. Now they probably have Pokemon card collecting. I don't know, but yeah, just finding commonality with people and building friendships and relationships. Some of the strongest friendships we have, are and have been birthed from our small group. Mm-hmm. We've had people that we've known for over 40 years in our small groups, and we've had people that I wasn't sure about even inviting to come to the small group, and they just, plugged in, and we've become great friends with them. So, anyway, getting back to that, it's the model in the body is to do the semesters, and those times are approaching. So if you guys are listening, and your church is offering, and you don't want to host, there's no hate in that, and you've never participated, now might be a good time to consider that. You may learn and grow, and you may make some friends. One of the favorite models that I've seen is called 6 and 6, and it's where 3 couples cook dinner for each other at their house. So couple A invites couple B and C to their house, and they eat supper. And then the next week or two, couple B invites A and C, and then a few weeks later, C invites A and B. So they just cook a meal.
Like a rotation.
It's like a rotation. I think that's a great one.
Yeah.
You know, and it takes a little pressure off because you're only doing it one time versus a 12-week study or a 6-week study or whatever.
Sharing the load.
And it's not just like your best friends. You know, that does you no good because you hang out with your best friends all the time.
Right.
It's hey, let's put our names in a hat and draw somebody out, and we're going to put these people. You'll never know what you have in common. I mean, seriously, we've had people tell us in our home who's made friends with other people in our groups that said, I would never have sat down at the table with this person. I would have never had this relationship had it not been for this group.
Yeah. Gotten to know this person. Yeah.
Because we try to be as diverse as we possibly can.
Right.
So anyway, I think it's not the answer to every problem, but I think it's a great way to build the body up. It's a great way for discipleship to disciple people. And there's a lot of great
Well, let's just
tools.
face it. We're just living in a day and time when people need to encourage each other.
Yeah.
I mean, if ever the body of Christ
Right.
needs each other, we're living in that time. Everybody needs encouragement. Everybody needs hope restored. Everybody needs to feel loved and accepted, and to feel like they've got somebody in their corner.
Mm-hmm.
You know, with so much diversity and so much trying to divide everybody.
Not diversity, division.
Yeah, I don't know why I
Diversity
say
is
diversity.
Jesus, but division is what you're
Division.
thinking.
You know, we need to make it a point, I think, to be very intentional to have relationships with other believers that encourage us.
That is the diversity.
Yeah, that we can encourage.
Yeah.
And also, what is the scripture that says, even more as you see the day approaching? Like,
Right.
about not forsaking the assembling of yourselves.
And
even
they weren't
more.
talking about going to church, right?
Right. They were talking about having community, even more as you see the day approaching. And, you know, now more than ever, prayer is crucial. So anytime you can gather and, you know, even if it's just for prayer, it doesn't have to be a Bible study.
It doesn't have to be a meal.
It doesn't have to be, yeah.
Your mom herself, like she has a Bible study,
Well,
right?
no,
And
she
prayer
has a
time.
prayer
group.
Prayer group. Yeah. So I think you know, it's just that has become more important than it's ever been. I
Right.
guess what I'm saying. Like used to, yeah, you might have got what you needed at church or Sunday school or whatever. Maybe you had, you know, a couple that you were friends with, and that's fine. But now we're going to have to be more intentional.
Right.
It's just we're getting into a season of just the culmination of things happening.
Right.
That we've got to really make it a point to support each other, encourage each other, love each other. That sense of community is vital. Too many people are, and this is a lie of the enemy, feeling alone. Even though they might have people around them, they still feel alone. They still feel hopeless. They still feel discouraged, which is because the bombardment is just heavy, you know. And I think it's just the time that we live in that we've got to think about how to combat that. And the best way I think that we can do that is obviously stay in the Word, but, you know, also to make it a point to encourage someone, make it a point to connect on another level,
Right.
spiritually, with other believers who you can lean on.
So, like, what I always place this with is you walk in the church, the building, They've got a greeter. How are you doing? I'm doing great, thank you. And you just stubbed your toe, or you closed your hand in the door when you were getting out. You're not doing great. Your hand freaking hurts. Or maybe your kid did something stupid, or maybe your kid is living somewhere out there that don't need to be living, and that's bearing on you. And then you walk in the door and the guy's like, hey, I'm doing great. And then you take about 5 steps and you see somebody and, hey man, how's it going? I'm doing good.
Or maybe you got a bad doctor's report.
Right. And you're just trying to find a seat and sit down to get fed something. Mm-hmm. And that's great. There's a time and place for that. But you really need to find community.
Right.
To be able to share the realities of your kid not doing the right thing, or the bad doctor's report. Or, very frankly, when you were sick and we took you to the hospital, I text the women in our small group before I text our pastor.
Right.
That's where my community was.
Right.
Those men and women that we were involved with, that's who got the call first.
Yeah.
And the preacher and all the rest of the stuff came later, of course. But that's really where it was at. So I just want to encourage people,
don't try to do it yourself.
No, there's an outlet. There's an outlet for that, and it doesn't have to be, well, I got to go in here and lie about how great everything is on Sunday morning. And not that you got to join a small group and just vomit on people all your problems, but there's people that everybody puts one leg on in their pants at a time.
One leg on.
One leg. That didn't sound right.
Puts
one leg in their pants at a time.
Yeah. And
sometimes we forget about that because we're friends on Facebook and we see how great their life is as they're posting pictures from Hawaii, but life is not great all the time.
Right.
It's hard sometimes. And I just want to encourage people to think about the small group. And if you have never been involved, well then just give it a shot. And if it doesn't work out, don't give up. Do it yourself. Do your own. I'm not trying to tell you not to disrespect your leaders, but to find models. We're involved in a model that I think is fantastic, and it works. It works better than what I've seen to this point ever. And if people are interested, they can contact us about it. I'd be more than happy to share all that with you. But it works, and it works great. And I just want to encourage them to at least consider the opportunity that's presenting itself. And if your church doesn't do it, maybe one of your friends' churches does. Just find somewhere to plug in. And don't do it with just your buddies. You can, but add some people in there. Diversity.
Yeah.
Diversify your group. You'll be shocked at what that diversity will bring to it. And I'm talking race. I'm talking age. I'm talking denominational. That's where you really start putting some meat on the bones there. So,
right.
Anything you want to add before we go about community small groups, Zoom small groups, outside of the 4 walls?
2 things.
Okay.
I'll say 1, I agree. And 2, if they don't want to fix a meal, they could serve goldfish.
And pies. Thanks, Carla. That was so enlightening.
Yeah. I was just thinking if you're trying to keep it simple.
Yeah. You really don't have to serve a meal.
No, but you could pass a bowl of goldfish around.
Just put one in the middle and everybody could just get a handful at a time. And the dogs could pick up after you when you're finished. Or if you have toddlers, they'll find them, I'm sure.
If you have toddlers, you definitely have goldfish
You got
in your
goldfish
house.
for sure. Not the mega ones, the regular ones. Guys, we appreciate you listening. We'll be back the next time here on The Marriage Creative. Find us online at themarriagecreative.com. And again, thank you for listening and sharing the show.
Today's episode is brought to you by Post and Gate. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Marriage Creative. Subscribe and click the notification icon so you can stay up to date with all things The Marriage Creative. To learn more about who we are and what we do, check us out on social media or go to themarriagecreative.com today.
Awkward silence.